This is Dr.RED Panda.
Would you lick the king's butt for power, gold, and lifetime job security? Sounds crazy, right? Well, believe it or not, in Tudor England, this was an actual royal job. Hi, I'm Dr. Red Panda. Today, we're diving deep into a position so bizarre, so uncomfortable, and yet so powerful it sounds like a joke. But it's not. Would you be willing to wipe the king's butt? Meet the groom of the stool. No, it's not a fancy name for a footman or a butler. The groom of the stool was the man responsible for cleaning the king's royal backside after he used the bathroom. Yes, you heard that right. In a time when toilets were just holes in the floor and hygiene was questionable at best, the king needed someone to handle his… Well, you get the idea. But don't let the disgusting job fool you. The groom of the stool was one of the most trusted and most powerful men in the entire kingdom. Why? Because this wasn't just about wiping bottoms. This was about access. Access to the king's most private moments, his secrets, his health, and his mood. Only the groom of the stool saw the king when he was at his most vulnerable. This man was present during intimate moments, knew exactly what the king ate, and even kept track of his health through his bodily functions. Sounds gross? Absolutely. But that kind of access gave him immense influence. The groom controlled information flow, had the king's ear, and could sway decisions behind the scenes. Some groom of the stools even became royal advisors, shaping policies and political moves. So wiping royal cheeks was not just a disgusting chore, it was a path to real power. Imagine having the king's trust to that level, knowing his secrets, controlling who could talk to him, and influencing his decisions. All because you were the only person who could handle his business. This job wasn't just about dignity. It was about political clout, wealth, and climbing the social ladder. And for a man living in Tudor England, becoming the groom of the stool was one of the best ways to secure a lifetime of influence and riches. The most shitty official position in the UK. Now, you might be wondering, how does a job that involves wiping royal butt cheeks become one of the most powerful roles in the kingdom? Well, welcome to the gloriously dysfunctional bureaucracy of Tudor England. Let's start with the title, Groom of the Stool. Sounds fancy, right? In reality, stool here means exactly what you're afraid it means, poop. This royal groom wasn't brushing horses. He was brushing cheeks, royal cheeks. But the position wasn't just about post-poop cleanup. Oh no, this was an elite role, reserved for noblemen of high birth and unquestioned loyalty. You didn't get this job as a joke or punishment. You got it because the king trusted you enough to literally see him with his pants down. The groom's daily responsibilities included preparing the king's clothes stool, which is basically a luxurious, velvet-covered portable toilet. He ensured the chamber was clean, the linens fresh, and the water warm. He even managed the royal bowel schedule. Yes, that was a thing. There are actual records showing the king's bathroom routines being documented like official state matters. Imagine working in logistics for constipation. But that's not all. Because the groom had uninterrupted private access to the monarch, he naturally became the go-between for messages, favors, and even political advice. Over time, the position evolved. By the 16th century, the groom of the stool was no longer just a servant. He was a confidant, advisor, and sometimes even a gatekeeper to the king himself. Some grooms of the stool even oversaw parts of the privy chamber, the king's private quarters, and helped manage finances and appointments. Think of it as being the king's private secretary, executive assistant, and personal hygiene manager, all rolled into one. Disgusting? Definitely. Influential? Even more so. And because nobody else got this kind of unfiltered, unguarded time with the king, the groom's words carried enormous weight. When he whispered, the king listened. And when he recommended someone for promotion, people paid attention, because they knew whose behind he had literally covered. So yes, while the job started in the toilet, it ended in the throne room. This was England's most hands-on political position. One foot in the bathroom, the other in the halls of power. And somehow it all worked. Until it didn't. From the privy to the court. How did he become a powerful minister? Okay, so we've established that wiping the king's royal rear wasn't just gross, it was strategic. But how far could a groom of the stool really go? Spoiler alert, all the way to the top. Let me introduce you to some real-life examples of history's most successful bathroom attendants. First up, Sir Hugh Dennis. This guy served King Henry VII in the late 1400s, not only as groom of the stool, but also as the manager of the king's private finances. That's right, he went from wiping cheeks to controlling the royal wallet. Imagine being so close to power that you're handling the king's gold and his leftovers. He wasn't just a servant, he was part of the king's inner economic circle, trusted, unquestioned, untouchable. Then came the big leagues, the Tudors. Henry VIII, the guy who had 6 wives and a real talent for dramatic divorce, he elevated the groom of the stool into a true political force. One of his grooms, Sir Anthony Denny, wasn't just wiping. He was whispering, advising, signing off on royal documents. When Henry was old, obese, and constantly ill, Denny controlled who could enter the king's room, what information reached him, and even, get this, who was allowed to speak to him on his deathbed. That's not a servant. That's a kingmaker. And people knew it. Court factions fought not over who got to be a general or a treasurer, but who got closest to the king's chamber pot. In a world without texting or DMs, the groom of the stool was the inbox. And if he didn't like you, your message simply didn't get delivered. By the time Elizabeth I came around, the position had changed titles and structure, but the influence remained. Private servants had the king or queen's ear in ways that no noble or bishop could match. Because real power doesn't come from status, it comes from access. And who had more access than the guy with the royal toilet schedule in his pocket? So yes, this may be the only job in history where your career literally went through crap and came out royal. How disgusting is it? Can you handle it? Alright, so now you know the groom of the stool had power. But let's get real, what did this job actually involve? Because no matter how much gold or influence you're offered, at some point you still have to face the butt. Let's paint the picture. We're in Tudor England. No plumbing. No soap as we know it. No scented candles. The royal toilet? It's called the clothes stool. Basically a fancy wooden box with a hole in it, lined with velvet, and sometimes perfumed with herbs. The groom's job started before the king even sat down. He'd prepare the stool, warm the cloths, check the linen, maybe say a polite "Your Majesty, the chamber is ready." Dignified, right? Then the king would do his business, sometimes in silence, sometimes while talking policy. And then came the wipe. Now this wasn't some quick toilet paper situation. The groom used soft linen cloths, often warmed, and water in a silver basin. And not just one wipe, this was a thorough royal cleansing. We're talking folds, creases, the full medieval spa experience. All performed in total silence with utmost respect, while keeping eye contact to an absolute minimum. Oh, and did I mention the groom had to inspect the results? Because part of his job was to track the king's health. Was the output too hard? Too soft? Wrong color? A monarch's poop was considered a state health record. Could mean the difference between war and peace, or just the wrong breakfast. And if you're thinking, well, at least it was just once a day, not necessarily. Tudor diets were heavy meat, wine, no fiber. The king might need help several times a day. And guess who was always on standby? Also, no gloves. That's right. The groom used bare hands, maybe with a towel wrapped around. Because, honor. This was a symbol of trust. And remember, no one else was allowed in during this sacred ritual. No bodyguards, no wives, no bishops. Just you and the royal bum. So yes, it was powerful. But it was also deeply personal, uncomfortably intimate, and extremely squishy. And somehow, men competed for this role. Because when you're that close to the king, when you literally hold his dignity in your hands, you're not just a servant. You're a silent weapon in silk gloves. Or in this case, no gloves at all. Even the royal family couldn't bear it. So, we've laughed, we've gagged. We've watched men climb the ladder of power one wipe at a time. But nothing lasts forever. Not even the royal butt wiper. By the time the 18th century rolled around, things were changing fast. The Enlightenment hit Europe like a cold shower. Science, reason, and wait for it, privacy started becoming fashionable. Kings and queens were no longer seen as semi-divine poop machines who needed an official hygiene squad. They were becoming human, flawed, vulnerable, and honestly, a little embarrassed. The idea of a grown monarch needing help in the bathroom started to feel, well, outdated. Even the royals were like, maybe I don't need a nobleman holding a perfumed towel while I do my business. Shocking, I know. One of the final nails in the chamber pot was Queen Victoria. She ruled for most of the 19th century, and she was not about that groom of the stool life. She believed in modesty, boundaries, and not having your poop logged like a royal memo. So the title quietly faded away. The role dissolved into more dignified court positions, like private secretary or Lord Chamberlain. Still powerful, but with much cleaner job descriptions. And so ended one of the weirdest careers in history, a job that started in the latrine and died in the age of etiquette. But let's be honest, even now, in the modern world of suits, handshakes, and high-speed Wi-Fi, true power still lies in access. Maybe we don't have a groom of the stool anymore, but the people closest to power still whisper in private, influence decisions behind closed doors, and control what flows in and what comes out. History repeats itself, sometimes in armor, sometimes in velvet, and sometimes with a warm linen cloth. I'm Dr. Red Panda. Thanks for diving headfirst into history's deepest toilet with me. If you enjoyed this trip down the royal drain, leave a comment. Would you do it for power? And remember, real power doesn't always wear a crown. Sometimes, it just carries the wipes. So next time someone tells you their job stinks, just remember, at least they're not wiping royal butts. And that's a wrap for this episode of the video. I'm Dr. Red Panda. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. Until next time, take care.